This is Dr. Paul Thomlinson from Compass Health Network, and this is our podcast aimed at inspiring hope and promoting wellness. Here we try to offer listeners a better understanding of some of the challenges of these times we're living in and living through. An understanding built on insights from research in the social, behavioral, and health sciences, as well as from stories of lived experience. The bottom line is we need to find and apply the best evidence we can so that we can know, do, and be better and better. In this episode, I want to let you hear the rest of my conversation with a young man named Brryan Jackson, who was my guest last month for HIV Awareness Month podcast. Go back and listen to that if you haven't heard it yet. He has one of the most astonishing stories of tragedy transformed into hope I've ever heard. He has lived with HIV since he was literally a baby, as his father intentionally injected him with HIV-tainted blood when he was 11 months old. He is an expert on hope and has forever changed the meaning of HIV for me. It now stands for Hope is Vital. More on that later. So please listen to the rest of our conversation with an open heart and mind and be inspired by the amazing soul of Brryan Jackson.
Then at age 5, full-blown AIDS, they launched the investigation. They determined that he had done this unspeakable thing, the motive being very likely I just don't want to pay child support, but he indicated his motive was he just didn't want you to grow up with complications of asthma. That was his take on it.
Yeah, I mean, every parole hearing, he has a new excuse. So I don't know what's real and what's not, or what he's just saying so he can get out of prison or.
Right. Amazing. I know I'm not the only one with my jaw on the floor upon hearing that story. It is, in my experience, and I'm sure you've heard this over and over, a unique story. I've never heard anything like it. I don't think anybody has. I did watch the sentencing video where the judge sentenced your father to life in prison, and anybody gets a chance to hear that one, they should give it a look. It's pretty scathing, as well it should be. Unbelievable story, man. So I heard your mom talk on one video, and she said that you had been, in her words, I believe, ridiculed, discriminated against, called AIDS boy, and all kinds of other awfulness by, I'm assuming, other kids, etc. And, I can't help but think about how your story might be helpful and hopeful for folks who are also being discriminated against or, bullied or whatever. So would you mind talking a little bit about how you responded to that reality of the people being awful to you after you'd already had this awful thing happen to you? And what was it that gave you the strength to rise above that, if you don't mind talking about that?
Yeah, I just kind of rewind to, back into the story in 1996. So 5 months to live. All my mom wanted me to do is have a normal childhood while I can. One of the things that she wanted to do was get me enrolled in school. But the school district wasn't sure about having somebody who was HIV positive come to school. You have to remember, there's a little bit of grace given there, considering the 90s was a very confusing time about the HIV.
For sure.
Virus. But there's also that grace could only be extended to, well, are you educating yourself beyond that grace extended? So first day of school, I wasn't allowed to go to school. They tried to get my mom to homeschool me, put me in the homebound program. And she's like, no, my son's going to school. And so finally a compromise was reached that I can come to school for half a day. I can't drink from any of the water fountain.
Oh, wow.
I can only use one restroom in the entire school, and that's in the nurse's office. And the fourth term that they wanted is for everyone in the school to know that I was HIV positive. So you win some, you lose some, negotiation happens, right? The only thing that was off the table was telling everybody that I was HIV positive. So finally I got to go to school, and but it was a weird experience, not only because I was hard of hearing, so I wore hearing aids that made my ears stick out, and glasses, right? Things I could already be bullied for, right?
Right.
But then, I think kids notice like, oh, he's not using the bathroom we use, not drinking from the water fountains. He has this interpreter that follows him around. And at first it wasn't really kids who were saying anything. Kids are innocent, right? And they soak up the experience from the adults, and I think they conform to the patterns learned from adults.
Yeah.
And one of the things was that I think people recognized my mom. They saw my mom has a kid, a son, and they put two and two together, and it turned into, oh, being left out of birthday parties and social invitation, because they didn't want their kid hanging around with the HIV kid. And so even my older sister, who has a different father, decided that he didn't want anything to do with the AIDS family and exited her life. So that was like the reality set. And then towards fourth and fifth grade, it wasn't the parents who were saying things. It was my own peers running away from me in the hallways, calling me names like AIDS boy, gay boy. By the time I got into sixth grade, people, the verbal taunts became physical abuse. So I was being shoved in the lockers. I tried to get the adults to make a stop, and then their response was, oh, just let us know when it happens again. Just let us know when it happens again. So they wouldn't do anything. So I took matters into my own hands and started sticking up for myself. That got me in trouble as well. I would get the heaviest sentence. I would get expelled from school. They would get just detention or something. And there was really no adult who was advocating for me or really protecting me or understanding the situation or the environment that was completely hostile towards me. And so about seventh grade, I remember being called into the principal's office for the last time and told me, don't bother coming back to school next year. And I don't even know why a principal is telling a kid this, right? This is a conversation with the parents.
Parental conversation, right?
Yeah, but you're not coming back next year. You're the problem child. And he said, let me explain what that means, that if you just weren't here, there wouldn't be a problem. And so that instantly went to my mind that, oh, I'm the problem. I started getting in that blinders on, oh, I'm the problem. And so one night I had 3 knives in front of me, and there's a disclaimer here. Anybody who's watching this or hearing this, if you have suicidal thoughts, like, please get help. But in this moment, the 3 knives I had in front of me, I asked myself which one can cut deeper. Because I thought I would just get rid of the problem. If I was a problem, I would get rid of the problem. But in this moment of darkness, a voice called me to my Bible, and I opened up this Bible, and the verse said, "Why so downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in God." And that word hope stuck out to me. And this was like 2003, so we didn't have internet. The best internet was dial-up internet, so you couldn't just go Google what hope is, and like that word hope just was like piquing my interest.
It's like a neon light beacon.
And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna put this plan off, and I'm gonna go try to figure out what hope is. And that started my Eat, Pray, Hope journey. I guess to summarize hope is that hope is a mindset. Hope is like this, hope is spirituality, hope is physical, and hope is mental. But hope is just even more than that. Hope is a lifestyle. But what I realized is that in the when we're born, we're carried into this world, and then we're crawling, we're taking baby steps, then we're running, and then we have to take leaps of faith. But what guarantees us that we can make those leaps? So if we fall short, we can get back up. And that is hope. And hope is truly vital. I also realized that, when we have oh crap moments in life, we ask ourselves two things. What can I get out of this? And why is this happening to me? But then I realized through the perspective of hope is it's no longer what can I get out of this, it's what can I give out of this. And it's not why is this happening to me, it's why not me. Because everything we go through in life has the ability to make or break us, to tell a story to help somebody else.
Yeah.
And but I was still struggling. I was just like, what is my story? What does a chump like me have to share? And somebody asked me, if you're not sharing your story with the world, what's the world missing? And I'm just like, nothing.
You figured that part out.
But no, like we all have a unique story, a unique circumstance that we endure to help other people. And that's not downplaying what anybody is going through. What anybody is going through is very real.
Yeah.
What anybody goes through affects two people can go through the same thing and it can affect them very differently. This is not a push to say, oh, get over your problems and just have hope, right? Yeah. Hope is a journey that you get towards by working with a mental health professional. I always tell people to have a life coach, mentor, counselor, or therapist, whatever you need to get there in your journey to share.
Yeah.
Because the pain we endure can become hope to somebody else to spare them from the pain we go through.
Gosh, you have said so much that I want to go back and hit on, including the things about the bullying, about your bout with suicidal thoughts, about hope in particular. But you're talking about hope there, and I also remember one of your videos. You said, the grass isn't greener on the other side of the fence; it's greener where you water it. And that kind of fits with what you're saying, which is hope is not necessarily just something that gets delivered from on high magically. It's also something that you cultivate and you work on. And I think that's a good metaphor, that watering your grass, building on your hope. And one of the things you said really struck me, and we talk a lot about in certain circles in Compass about taking care of others. Giving to others is actually some of the best self-care you can do. That when you take care of others, when you give of yourself in a meaningful way to other people, that you get at least as many benefits as the other person does, and sometimes much more. So you're really singing from a really good songbook, I think.
Can I add to that?
Oh, absolutely.
Grass isn't greener on the other side of the fence; it's greener where you water it.
Yeah.
First off, people listening to this podcast might say, "Oh, I heard that in the Justin Bieber song," but if you actually look up on record when I said it way before the Justin Bieber song. Just put that out there.
Hey, I'm a believer, and I believe. So when I'm thinking back on those years that you were, I think, victimized, bullied by the system, not understood. Here's this, precious little baby, and then growing into a little boy who's got this awful thing that's happened to him, and yet still can't find a place where he can feel like he belongs, where you belong. So do you have anything else to say about, how you got through all those years? And I know I don't want to get to the age 13 in a minute, but in that entire time when you were drinking from the one fountain and going to one bathroom, being treated like the most overt signs of discrimination you can think of, you were going through all that as a little boy, and the bullying stuff and being called names. Just, not to belabor the point too much, but any other thoughts about someone who's going through something like that, what do you attribute your ability to keep walking every day, one foot in front of the other, and keep going, as you did?
That's a great question. I guess in those younger years when I was being bullied, I think my childhood innocence was still kind of there. Like I didn't view it as bullying. But I mean, here's the thing. In every situation we go through, no matter good or bad, it's just, you just said it. It's very important to just take one step at a time. We live in a culture that wants things like fast, fast, fast. But progress takes time. And progress is literally, if you can only take one step today, take one step today. You can take 5 steps today, take 5 steps today. And even if you have to take a step back, that's still a step, But it's all about how you start framing it. But if you don't frame it in the lens of hope, then it just creates that building up of all this baggage that's going to start weighing on you and weighing on you. And before you know it, you're going to get to this place where you only feel like there's one way out. But I'm here to say that there's not one way out. There's multiple ways out of whatever situation you're in. And I think that one of those areas is just, whether it's getting in to see a mental health professional or it's changing your mindset.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you there. So I want to ask you a couple other questions about your struggle with suicidal thoughts at age 13 and how you got there, because it sounds like you got to the place where you were convinced you were the problem. And by the way, that's what all the research on suicide really tends to indicate, is that folks who feel like they're a burden to the people in their lives, obviously those are the ones who are most at risk for suicidal thinking and so forth. But most importantly, perhaps not necessarily how did you get there, because everybody can get there in a different way, but what gave you the ability to turn things around? And I think you've kind of already answered this, but I want to give you a chance to talk about what gave you the ability to turn things around from looking at these 3 knives to, going and being an advocate for HIV funding with the legislature, et cetera. What was it about that allowed you to turn things around?
Honestly, it was one step at a time.
Yeah.
It was starting to recognize my ability. And what I think happens is that, somebody once said the only reason things happen for you is because people feel sorry for you. And I have to disagree, because the majority of my life, I have not had anybody feel sorry for me. However, I realized when I started putting a positive foot forward, people can get behind that. People root for people putting the positive foot forward. People want to be a part of a story that is greater than themselves. And I think that's what I surrendered to, a story that is greater than myself, a story of hope. But 2, I think when I started doing that, people started to realize, oh, this guy's going somewhere. I want to invest in him. Yeah. And so, that moment that I decided, like, oh, I'm just going to share my story. I started sharing my story at a camp. They invited me to share my story at high schools and stuff across the country. And then before you know it, I was giving congressional briefings, and I've had the opportunity to speak all over the world. So I don't think anybody's feeling sorry for us, but I think people buy into something greater than themselves. And that's what we need to cling into.
I love that. Yeah, you surrendered to something, a story greater than yourself. I absolutely love the way you said that. And one of the premises of this podcast is that people telling their stories has healing embedded in it. That people can find healing and hope in stories of lived experience and overcoming adversity. And you're as good an example, better example of that than just about anybody I've ever met, I think. Let me ask you a couple other things in the remaining few minutes here. I know you haven't seen your father since you were a baby, right? So, and you've talked about how you've forgiven your father. which is, by the way, unimaginable to many, to even think about, forgiving something so heinous. But what allowed you to do that? Because I believe in the mental health benefits of forgiving your abuser, forgiving your tormentor, which doesn't mean that you absolve people of responsibility, but it means that you make a conscious choice to do that. Can you talk a little bit about your forgiving your dad and what that's done for you and how you did it even?
Things were getting better. Every time I did a congressional briefing, I would be hounded with the, press, trying to get my face and stuff. And then we agree, okay, you can do the interview, but you can't show my face. You have to use a different name. And I was getting an award from Youth in Need. I made the decision that I didn't care anymore if people knew who I was. And I was like, people probably already know who I am. So, they're bullying me for it. So why don't I just say, hey, you don't have any power over me.
Right.
But weeks leading up to that interview, my pastor did a sermon on forgiveness, and that really went to my core. Yeah, you need to forgive people. And I was just I see where you're getting at, but yeah, that's not happening. So I'm going to forgive people at the base level, right? But I did this interview, and then the person asked me, is there anything else you'd like to say? And I was like, oh, I want to forgive my father, by the way. And I was just taken back, what just came out of your mouth?
Right.
But here's the beauty of forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean that you have to forget. And forgiveness doesn't mean that you have to allow that person back into your life or have a relationship with that person. Exactly. And so, people who you forgive can still pay the consequences for their actions. They don't need to be excused. But forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about yourself, your soul, your mentality. Bingo. And when you allow yourself to forgive, you're taking power back. You're saying that this is no longer your story. This is my story.
I love
and actually, after I forgave my father, my health did a turnaround. I finally became undetectable, which means the virus, HIV virus, was sustained, and my T cell count was at an all-time high, giving me a 0% chance of passing on the virus. I felt like I was on cloud 9. So there is power in forgiveness. Absolutely. For yourself. And it just doesn't do mental wonders. It does physical wonders. It does spiritual wonders. But forgiveness takes time. I'm telling the story.
It's not one and done, right?
Yeah, I'm telling the story in a constrained thing. So it's oh yeah. And then on the 11th day, boom, I forgave it. No, it was time. And even what I've realized about forgiveness is forgiveness goes hand in hand with grieving. And it's not just a one and done act, right? Yeah. It's actually a constant thing, because there's some health issues that I'm still dealing with. And so my mind goes back to who's to blame for this, who kind of destroyed my immune system. And then I have to walk through that process all over again. So grieving and forgiveness go hand in hand, but it's good therapy for the soul.
Absolutely. What you said reminds me of one of my old mentors used to say, holding hatred and unforgiveness in your heart towards someone is like drinking a vial of poison and expecting it could kill the other guy. It doesn't work that way. Hey, we only have a minute or so, but if you don't mind, I'd like to just, it's hard to maintain hopefulness in a difficult life, a difficult world, but what's your elevator speech, if you could give it, Reader's Digest, on the attitude, skills, beliefs, whatever, what allows you to remain so hopeful and be such an inspiring guy?
Man, you asked really great questions. I should have been warned about this before I came out here.
I'm so sorry. Psychologist.
Man, is it getting hot? Life has meaning. You just have to look for it. And oftentimes, a lot of the things that we go through in life are distracting us from finding the true meaning. And so I encourage all of you guys to put on the lens of hope and start putting the thought of hope on top of your mind, and I guarantee you'll find it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed Brryan's brief masterclass in cultivating hope, overcoming adversity, and the spiritual, psychological, and physical health benefits of forgiveness. Please follow him on his social media outlets, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, at Brryan Jackson. That's Brryan Jackson. And he also has a clothing company called Hope is Vital, HIV, also on social media. And they're doing a mental health fundraiser at the moment. And his website is brryanjackson.com. Please follow and support this amazing young man. And thanks for listening.